So I'm sure many of you have seen videos of people talking about the things they like and don't like about living in Japan. But since I've been living here for a number of years now and I consider myself to be fully out of the honeymoon phase, I thought it would be a good idea to make a little list from a more objective point of view about the things that are good and not so good of living in Japan. Starting with the quality of life. But I don't necessarily mean to talk about the quality of life from a financial point of view. I'd just like to talk about certain human qualities that I find interesting about life in Japan. As many of you must have heard, Japan is actually a very clean country. One of the cleanest ones I've ever lived in. And while yes, it's true that there are no trash bins anywhere on the streets, it goes a little bit further than that. I'm sure many of you have heard that in Japanese schools, there's no cleaning staff. There are no janitors of any kind. Because it's actually the children themselves who take responsibility for keeping their school clean. And this goes as far as cleaning the classrooms, cleaning the hallways, and even the restrooms. This, of course, is a very important skill to acquire because it teaches them not only to take care of the place where they learn, but also once they go out into the real world, they learn how to take care of their surroundings as well. And for example, it can go as far as finding a public bathroom in the middle of a highway, in the middle of nowhere, and you can be certain that that bathroom will be clean and well taken care of. And interestingly enough, that's something that you do get to see very often. Often my neighbors are cleaning the street in front of their houses, or you see people walking on the streets and they pick up branches or little leaves that may have fallen from trees. And as such, generally the streets are kept in an immaculate state. But that goes again a little bit further than that. People don't only take care of their surroundings by keeping them clean, but they also take very good care of their interpersonal relationships. They all, as I'm sure you know, treat each other with absolute respect and civility. Of course, there are exceptions. Sometimes you do find the common salaryman who's just pissed off from work and is in a very bad mood on the train. But as a general rule, everyone is courteous with each other. And this tends to be a good reflection of what the actual quality of life is. Because generally, happy people means a good life. So for that reason alone, I have to put the quality of life on the good side of things. But on the other hand, for things to work so precisely, there has to be a set number of rules. And it is true that the number of rules in Japan can be exceedingly high. Not that I have any problem with that. I mean, I understand the importance of rules, but it can be a little bit frustrating when you're faced with the excessive attachment that people have to these rules. And oh my god, they have such a hard time just being able to slightly bend the rules a little bit. For example, a number of months ago, I was trying to open a specific type of bank account for my business here, and for that I needed to make an online appointment and submit a number of documents that I did not have and I had no way of acquiring. So my decision was to go to the bank and try to talk to someone about any other alternatives I might have. And that exchange went a little bit like this. Excuse me, I'm trying to open a business bank account, but I don't have the necessary documents for the online appointment. So I was wondering if there's any other alternative that I could have? Yes, to open a bank account, you need to make an online appointment. Yes, I know, but I don't have the documents they're asking for, so I was wondering if there's anything I could do to fix that. Well, yes, you have to make an online appointment. I know that, but I cannot make the online appointment because I don't have the documents. Yes, but we cannot open a bank account for you here. You have to do it online. I know, but I cannot make... That's okay, all you need to do is go to this link right here and you'll be able to do it without problem. No, I know that, but I don't have the documents that they're asking me to get, so I cannot make the appointment. But when you make the online appointment, they'll tell you the documents you need. So you kind of get the point. You feel like you're turning around the same point without actually being able to find a solution. And that is a problem that happens more often than you might think. You always feel like you're talking to some kind of machine that has a predetermined dialogue to display, and when you ask a question or say something that forces them to get out of that dialogue, suddenly the whole system breaks down. And you'll find that anywhere in the city, whether you're in a restaurant or you're in the bank trying to open an account. So one of your main challenges as a foreigner is to understand how that system works and how you can fit into it. So for that reason alone, and for all the challenges that brings, I have to put the excessive number of rules, or not even that, just the excessive attachment to those rules, on the bad side of things. But now let's talk about work. Now, as those who watch my channel know, I came here to create my own business, and that actually has been a very interesting journey. I'll be sure to share more on that in the future. But one of the interesting things about coming to live in Japan is that there are a lot of work opportunities, particularly for foreigners. Although, yeah, it's true that the vast majority of foreigners, particularly Western expats that come here, they tend to work as English teachers. And that's an absolutely oversaturated market. So if you'd like to come here as an English teacher, by all means, means do so, but know that you'll be working with a handful of seemingly untrustworthy companies, and you will not be able to work in the best conditions, and you will also not be able to get the best pay you can get for your time. However, leaving all that aside, you should keep in mind that when you come here as a foreigner, you have a set of unfair advantages that might make your business stand out in a good way. For example, me and my wife, we came here from Switzerland, and although in Switzerland it's completely normal for people to speak 3, 4 or even 5 languages, here in Japan that's absolutely not the case. When we first came to Japan, we started by simply giving music lessons. But then we thought, why only give music lessons if we can, on the other hand, give music lessons in 5 different languages? And so that gives us a much wider spread over the entire market. We can appeal to the locals, we can appeal to the foreigners also and teach them in their own language, and we can also appeal to the locals who want to learn in other languages. And so that is able to exploit even further the potential of your business and could eventually make it grow in ways that it couldn't have in your home country. So when you come here to Japan, keep in mind what your unfair advantages are, those particular skills or qualities that, even though they might seem normal back home, here in Japan, they make you the exception. So for that, I have to put the work opportunities in Japan on the good side of things. And keeping on the same trend, here in Japan you'll find that there are certain corners of the market that are still completely unexplored. Like I mentioned just now, for example, being able to speak multiple languages will actually open a huge amount of doors for you in this country. Remember that still the vast majority of people in Japan only speak Japanese. So just like me, I also have other colleagues and friends who have been able to create their businesses and expand them further thanks to their ability to speak multiple languages. But maybe for you that looks slightly different. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the world of languages or music. Maybe the way that finances are applied in your country, or marketing or advertising is applied in your country, is very different from the way that it is applied here. So when you come here, you bring a fresh perspective and fresh skills that can be very useful in a market like this. So for that, I also have to bring the unexplored potential of the market to the good side of things. Going back a little bit earlier to the quality of life in Japan, of course, Japan is a country that historically has been extremely conservative for centuries and centuries. Having a big history of invasions and wars and attempted colonization and so on, it has found a way to develop a very solid social structure. And that is something that at times can make it seem like a very old-fashioned country. People are very, very much rooted in their own values, and those values tend to change very, very slowly through time. And when you compare that to a Western world that's evolving and changing ever so rapidly, you can sometimes get the feeling that Japan might be being left behind in certain aspects. For example, as I'm sure you must know, that meme of Japan using fax machines, it's still very much true. There are certain companies, albeit not all of them, that still use fax machines to this day and that do most or some of their paperwork still by hand. But you have to remember that this is a system that has been specifically created to fit into the life of the Japanese citizen. So when someone like me or you comes to this country, you are without a doubt going to have troubles fitting into that system. And it can pose obstacles as ridiculous as simply by the fact that you have a middle name or that your name is slightly too long to fit in the application form. As I'm sure you know, of course, Japanese names on average have 2 characters for a last name and 2 characters for the first name, so the space required is very short. But when I come with a long European name, then suddenly the entire system breaks down. And then this staff member has to talk to the manager and to the boss over there to figure out how we can enter the foreigner's name into our Japanese system. And so that means that inevitably every time you go to the town office to either change your address or change your phone number or fill in any kind of application, it's always going to take an excessively long amount of time while the entire chain of employees talk amongst themselves about how they can fit your name into their application form. So for that very frustrating reason alone, I have to put the entire Japanese bureaucratic system on the bad side of things. Now the next point I want to talk about is the language barrier. As you must imagine, with the Western world becoming excessively unified, you find more and more people that speak multiple languages, particularly if you come from Europe, for example. It is very common, as I mentioned earlier, to find people who speak 2, 3, 4 or even more languages. But that is not necessarily the case here in Japan. Now, as I mentioned in some of my earlier videos, that doesn't mean that it's impossible to come here if you don't speak the language, but it is without a doubt going to make things a lot more difficult for you if you don't at least have some level of understanding. You should expect that the vast majority of application forms or paperwork in general that you're going to fill in this country is going to be exclusively in Japanese, as well as the vast majority of office workers you'll come across might not be able to speak English. So it goes without saying that if you plan to move freely around the country, you have to at least be able to defend yourself verbally. Writing and reading, that might be a different matter, and you can sort of get away without being able to do it, but speaking is going to take you a long way. Now, for me personally, I find learning languages to be a very enriching process. And so I actually enjoyed the process quite a bit. And I was even able to take one of the national Japanese exams that are given by the government. However, I understand the challenges and the amount of work and dedication that it takes to learn a language like this. So for that reason, I guess I have to put the language barrier between the good and bad. Now, as you can see, deciding whether living in Japan is worth it or not is not a very simple matter, because we're all different and we're all looking for different things. But if living in Japan is something you're determined to do, then you cannot miss this video right here, where I'll teach you everything you need to know in order to be able to come, live and work in Japan. So don't miss it, and I'll see you next time.